Welcome to RHB's Insider Network. My name is Jessica Green, and together we'll be bringing you the best and the brightest of Canada's rental housing industry. Today I'm here with Kris Boyce, CEO of Greenwin Inc., and Shannon Williams, Vice President of Karma Industries. We're talking about sub-metering.
Kris, why don't you kick us off with a little bit about Greenwin?
Greenwin is one of the largest property management companies in Ontario. We manage over 20,000 units in multi-residential. We own and manage 4,000 units ourselves. We've been in the industry since the early 40s, so it's over 65 years of proven track record. One of our great, unique pieces to our company is a family-run company, which is very unique. We're very community-focused and also very energy conscious.
So, Shannon, it's actually funny to hear this coming out of my mouth, but I know that sub-metering has become one of the hottest trends in the property management industry. But, you know, before we get into the technical stuff, what would you say are, the top 3 reasons for a property manager or a landlord to implement sub-metering in their portfolio?
I think landlords are looking to accomplish dealing with rising utility costs. It also promotes energy conservation within the suite when individual units are metered. And we found that prospective tenants are actually looking for suites that are metered so that they can take ownership of their consumption habits.
Right. So they're not paying for their neighbors' utilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Kris, does Greenwin sub-meter?
Absolutely. And I agree with Shannon. It's beyond the financial savings for a property owner. We feel that sub-metering does put the tenants in the driver's seat by allowing them to take control of their consumption. It creates a bigger sense of community. The collective efforts to our tenants contribute not only just to the building efficiency, but to the energy conservation as a whole. So really, it's a win-win for both sides.
Right. So what was the first building that Greenwin sub-metered?
Yeah, the first building we completed was in Scarborough, and it was in 2011. So since then, we've completed 28 projects. We have 2 on the go, and 1 being where we are today on Roselawn Avenue. So again, by the end of this year, at a minimum, we'll have a total of 30 buildings that have been sub-metered in our portfolio.
So, Shannon, what percentage of buildings would you say in Toronto are currently sub-metered, and how is that number expected to change over the next, say, 5 years?
I'd say, Jessica, that there's probably approximately 80% of the rental buildings are still bulk metered in the city of Toronto. So the opportunity for sub-metering is enormous if we look at the major city centers across Canada. The move towards sub-metering really started to gain momentum, I would say, probably 2 to 3 years ago when legislation made the case more clarity on how tenants should be treated. And I think we're really going to see that this momentum is going to continue through for probably the next 5, 10, maybe even 15 years as landlords get on board with implementing this. All landlords are searching for the same result, which is dealing with rising utility costs.
So sub-metering is one of those things that's not just a big decision for the landlord. It's something that impacts the building and its residents as well. So I want to know about the double D's, that's due diligence, and some of the key things that landlords shouldn't overlook when they're about to take this plunge. So Shannon, let's start with you. From a supplier perspective, what should owners be looking for when they're evaluating a service provider?
I think the first question that I would ask that's really important is, what is the supplier's focus? Do they concentrate on sub-metering, or do they concentrate on sub-metering and a variety of other services? Also important is, who are the key players, company longevity, and access to decision makers. Is this a company that you want to remain with for a long term? And also, finally, I think the most important thing is talk to other owners. Service providers are excellent in selling themselves, but other owners will tell you exactly.
You want to hear word of mouth.
Exactly.
Right. So what's the due diligence process for you like, Kris? Does your team have a checklist of criteria?
We do, Jess. Just touching on, in addition with Shannon's point, like again, we go on our own checklist and we focus on the accountability and the reliability of the product and the vendor as well. So we ask ourselves questions such as, does the provider manufacture their own meters, or do they get them from a third-party supplier? Where are they manufactured? And warranties and guarantees.
Quality control.
Totally, and simple things such as ensuring that they include meter validations and they work and deal with Measurement Canada for verification. It's really a cost versus a value equation. Most importantly is communication. It's always communication is key. You have the right relationships in place.
I find that most conversations relating to energy can be tricky. Technology is always changing, and there's always speculative figures thrown around. And I find that they can often be nothing more than empty promises, which I think maybe you've experienced somewhere along the way. So is this true for sub-metering? Are there any red flags that you want to look for?
I think one thing is that you should always be comfortable with the numbers that are being told to you by prospective suppliers, regardless of what it is that they're going to be supplying you. I always encourage owners to do their homework and ask how those numbers were arrived at. Any reputable supplier should be able to tell you how they arrived at those numbers and answer all of your questions.
Right, complete transparency.
Exactly.
So Kris, I guess when it comes down to it, the numbers speak for themselves. So what would you say is the rough percentage of energy savings so far?
So it's a little early to talk about the exact savings for here where we are on Roselawn Avenue, but based safely on our other experiences with our buildings, when you look at the consumption behavior from an actively billed client to an unbilled client, you can see the difference. It can be up to 40% less used in consumption. So again, the numbers speak volumes, which is right there.
When it comes to sub-metering, one of the greatest challenges is that you're introducing new technology into an existing structure. So I want to talk a bit about the installation process and what it looks like for apartment buildings. So Kris, maybe you can give us a sense of what the process looks like for this particular building.
For this particular building, the first step was to work with the service providers to make sure it could be sub-metered. It's a 60-year-old building. It's got 8 floors, 138 apartment units. It's nestled in Roselawn and Forest Hill areas. Best location in Toronto. And again, once they say yes, it can be sub-metered through their checklist and their criteria, then the next step is to move along, okay? And proceed with the agreement, get it signed, and roll out your program.
Okay. So Shannon, maybe you can walk us through the technical side for a second. So after all the contracts are signed, what happens?
So typically after a project has been awarded, a service provider would go back and revisit the site to create an installation plan. This installation plan is typically all of the puzzle pieces gathered together, showing where the electrical closets are, how many meters we're going to need, the services that have to be, where they're fed from. So this information then is fed back to the factory for manufacturing, and the equipment is then flown to the building for installation.
Okay, so when we're talking about maintenance, what does that look like? How often do these systems need to be upgraded?
The rule for Measurement Canada used to be every 6 years, but technology has changed since then, and there's new metering systems out there that require only 5 or only every 10 years. The value of that, of the metering system that is being installed here at Roselawn, is that there's no moving parts. So maintenance really doesn't exist except for verification for attendance purpose.
Right. So this is a long-term relationship.
We're married. I mean, you're married with your vendor if you're sub-metering.
I now pronounce you client and service provider. Now it's time for the million-dollar topic, your renters. Kris, I imagine one of the biggest challenges is minimizing disruption among renters. So what are some of the things that Green will do when rolling out a new sub-metering program?
I think it's like any project, capital project and sub-metering project. After you've signed the agreement, You create with all the stakeholders a communication package. So we do the welcome packages, okay? And they're specific to the building that we're doing the sub-metering with. So we have our service provider come to the site with us. And it's critical that our staff understand the complete flow of the process, the forms, the rules and the regulations, because they're going to be the frontline people dealing with the clients. So again, it's training. It's training on how to complete the forms correctly. So when a tenant comes in and a potential tenant comes in to rent an apartment, they fill out the enrollment form with all the other paperwork. Once it's completed, it's returned to our service provider, and then it's processed.
Right. So essentially, you just want everybody on the same page.
Right. Communication training, right? Which is really important.
So have you had any feedback from renters and staff regarding the process?
Absolutely. A lot of the feedback is it's very straightforward. If the forms are completed properly, the process to the provider, it minimizes the workload on both sides when it's done accurately. Once the tenant's enrolled in the program, it takes about 6 weeks before they receive their first bill. They also have online access, which is so convenient to track their usage and any meter information. So again, it's a partnership, right, on both sides and with the service provider.
And everything's all digitized, right? So
It's automated, which is amazing. In this day and age, everybody wants everything online. So.
Right. So one of the topics, I guess, relating to sub-metering is the billing process. So what should we be looking for in a billing service provider?
I think probably the most critical thing when you're looking to engage a provider is what kind of software we're using for billing. There's lots of different variations out there, but there is industry standard software, and that's really critical to making sure that as changes happen, the government changes the way billing needs to occur, they change programs that are in effect, you need to know that your billing service provider can actually make the changes to the software, adapt quickly, make sure they're implemented on time, and that when those first set of bills go out that actually reflect those changes, that they're right.
So what are you using?
We actually, in 2003, we made a decision to start using a utility-grade billing software that's widely used throughout North America. It's called Harris North Star. The reason that we decided to go this route is that we service customers not only just in Ontario, but all across Canada. So we needed to make sure that we could meet the requirements and standards of every province. There's also peace of mind making sure that you're using this kind of software. Because at the end of the day, we know that the bills going out are correct. It gives our clients, the owners, peace of mind that their tenants are being treated properly, and the tenants get peace of mind that their bills are accurate.
Right. So you're trying to minimize disruption at every
Absolutely.
opportunity. Right. So I guess there's a fine line here, right? That the property manager, the landlord's clients really become your clients as well.
We've always treated it that their customers are our customers, and at the end result is to make sure that the relationship works.
Yes. Okay. So, Kris, to your point, the process is really about having the right relationships in place.
Exactly. So during the transition, our tenants have to have their questions answered. So what's really important is our service providers provide the client support, us being the client ownership group, and then our residents are the clients as well.
Okay. So what would you say is the most necessary thing for renters to get through this process in the most painless way? Is it the communications piece that you spoke to?
I think the most important support would be an in-house customer call center. I think that's critical. Making sure that the providers follow the Ontario Energy Board regulations, most importantly making sure the provider is experienced in our industry and understands the dynamics of the apartment living world, where you're dealing with a vastly different group of people every day. It's important that you understand that human factor. Again, 90% of your day will be in contact with people, and the other 10% is equipment. So, right? So.
Okay, so the system has been installed, the resident has been set up with the billing process, and it's time to start monitoring consumption. So at this stage, everyone is anxious for results, right? The thing just goes in, and people want to know, am I saving? So, Shannon, what are some of the things that we should be looking at, and what's the timeline to see results?
So typically after the first year of sub-metering, consumption has been, we know that consumption typically reduces by about 1,000 kilowatt hours per suite, which typically means about 15 to 25% of the total building consumption. It usually takes, though, a full year worth of sub-metering for us to start gathering data to allow us to start presenting savings back to the owner of the building.
Which is tough, right? Because people want instant results.
Absolutely. And given that rental buildings are based on turnover, continued support and enrollment into the building allows us to give them more data about realized savings. Having said that, our experience continues to support the 15 to 25% model that has become pretty much industry standard.
Right. So, Kris, how does your team judge the success of a certain project?
In the case of sub-metering, it's about understanding the building performance, which is the units consuming the most, and how the rest of the building is performing as well. So having that knowledge makes it easier to identify which energy retrofit projects are worth doing.
So, Shannon, we've touched on the importance of software, but I'm curious, what are some of the key management tools owners and landlords should be looking for in a service provider?
Well, owners want to be sure that the software being used allows them easy access to data.
Right.
The most essential part of this whole program is the proper enrollment of tenants. And if you don't have access to that data, you can't complete the forms. Secondarily, it's important that information can be downloaded and interrogated for whatever purpose it wants to be used by the accounting department or even analytics people inside of the company that they want to just see what's going on in the building. We also know that if companies actually meter the main services, they can look at that data and decide further on down the road, do we want to do a lighting retrofit? Do we want to look at our boiler chiller? It's a good tool to use to make sure that you're making informed decisions about going ahead with investments in the building.
So, Kris, despite the fact that every building is completely different, have these tools allowed you to compare and contrast different portfolios?
Definitely. One of the things that is important to us is we could additionally sub-meter certain equipment in our mechanical rooms just to determine the efficiencies or the lack thereof. So now all of a sudden the building factors go away. If my chiller in this building, for example, is working at 25% less efficiency in the building down the street, we can start planning for our CapEx and replacement programs accordingly. So it's a great benchmark. It's a great way to forecast.
All right, so we've come full circle and we are now back here in the lobby to talk about something that I find particularly exciting, which is rebates and incentive programs. I know that they're abundant in this industry, so we always like to remind our viewers to keep these at the top of their list. Are there any industry programs to help offset the cost of sub-metering?
There is, Jessica. Right now, the OPA has a great program running for lots of things, but specifically they have a sub-metering category, and the savings are very attractive for a landlord to consider. Typically, when we have been awarded a project, we start working with the landlord straight away to start the application process, put in the paperwork with expected savings, because we want to make sure that the landlord yields as much from that rebate as possible.
Right. So you're working together. Kris, I know that you always have a final thought. Anything that you want to add?
You know what? I think for any project that you're going to enter with and a new relationship, it always ask the right questions. Okay, it's key. There's many programs out there to take advantage of, and sometimes there is a fine line between being able to justify a project or not. So I think that would be my final thought.
Great, thank you. You're welcome. So ladies, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. We hope you enjoyed this segment of the RHB Insider Network, and we look forward to seeing you back soon. Thank you.
The Insider Network is an RHB Inc. production. RHB Inc. also publishes RHB Magazine and produces the RHB Newsreel.